Hello, everyone. Welcome to the sixth edition of Azure MVP Unplugged. Today, we have one very special guest. Mark, can you listen?
Yes.
Okay, thanks again and welcome one time more. Today, we are with Mark Brown and Evelyn Andreev, and we will talk about Cosmos DB. Mark Brown is a very special person in MVP community, Azure MVP community. Many Microsoft MVPs know him because probably 10 years Mark was responsible for Azure MVP program. So we stay many days in Redmond with Mark at auditorium, and it was really nice time for many MVPs, including me. So, welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Nice to be here. I appreciate the invitation. And yeah, hopefully someday we can all hang out together in the Microsoft Conference Center, watching sessions for 3 days. Well, actually, more than that, 5 days straight. Was that what I did? Because we couldn't fit it all into 3 days or 2.5 days, whatever the MVP folks do these days. So yeah, let's hope for a speedy end. Well, I guess it's too late for a speedy end to anything going on, but let's just pray for an end. I guess start from there.
Okay, thank you. We will talk about Cosmos DB, and the most important is that now Mark Brown is actually one of the main key persons in Cosmos DB product team. He's a principal program manager at Cosmos DB in Microsoft, and we have very interesting questions, and I will be glad to discuss with Mark and Evelyn some important moments around Cosmos DB. But probably from the beginning, it is good to share what exactly you are doing now. What is your relationship with Cosmos DB?
Sure. So I have a couple of different areas that I focus on with the product. One of my roles is as a feature PM for all of our management API. It's called the control plane in Azure, or resource provider, if you will, in Azure. That's the management API that controls basically the service itself, like provisioning, updating indexing policies, deleting resources, setting throughput, anything like that. Anything except for running queries or doing CRUD operations in and out of the database is management API. So that's one of the areas I focus on. It's not there's not a whole lot necessary to do other than just making sure that I keep kind of our samples up to date. Things like ARM templates or Bicep templates or PowerShell or CLI samples. I even have samples for using Azure Management Library. I don't know if people know this, but you can write code using any of, I think, it's like 6 or 7 different languages to provision and manage services in Azure using these auto-generated SDKs against the RP. So anyway, that's one area that I focus on, is all the management stuff. And like I said, it doesn't take, I don't have to, it's not like building new features for people like the rest of the service, because every service has a resource provider, if you will, and ARM pretty much dictates how you talk to it. The other area I work on and where I spend most of my time is on all of our kind of community outbound social media, all of that kind of focus and area. So MVPs is one of them in our RD community, but also just more broadly, kind of the community in itself, and reaching out to them, engaging them, trying to help them, whether it's on Twitter and they're complaining about something doesn't work, or maybe they're on Stack Overflow or on Microsoft Q&A. Wherever they come across, they could be making comments in our YouTube channel or on our blog. But I try to seek out and help people who are struggling or just have questions around the service in our product. Other stuff I focus on, I mean, any of the kind of the outbound channels. So our blog, our YouTube channel. I do a somewhat weekly podcast as well, although it's challenging trying to find new content every week. So there's some weeks in between episodes in there, but that'll crank up again once we get closer to build. I help organize things like our upcoming Cosmos DB Conf, which is our kind of online 2-day event where customers and community talk about building apps and services using Cosmos DB, and they can show kind of the cool stuff they build or kind of what they learned along the way, just showing off for others. I focus a lot on all of our documentation, including our Microsoft Learn lab content. Anything that's kind of to customer at kind of some kind of scale is where I'm focused on. Like the motto for my team is growth at scale. So I decidedly want to do scalable things and reach as many people as possible with both the product, but also just everything that we can do to help them find Cosmos, help them decide is it the right service or database for them, help them if they have questions. And that's kind of it, I guess, in a nutshell.
Yeah, you answer some of questions with this explanation, but anyway, it is interesting to provide additional information about probably also some useful resources around Cosmos DB. You already shared about Microsoft Learn and everything around you, and it is a relatively new certification program which already is available for Cosmos DB. Can you share some more details about this?
Sure. So we've just released a new. Can I share a screen that I can show you guys
Um,
stuff? Is that helpful?
yes, you can.
Okay, let me do that. So, while I'm talking, I'll kind of share with you information about stuff. So, by the way, this is kind of our this little microsite I've created, developer.azurecosmosdb.com. This is a good place to bookmark just for because I use this as a link aggregator to stuff. One of the things I can talk to you about is and this also has a link to our blog as well, which, by the way, if you're always curious as to what's the latest and greatest with Cosmos, it's always on here. So, yeah, we just announced our new specialty certification, our new Cosmos DB developer certification available here. This is, of course, a way to get certified on Cosmos DB. It also includes, there is a ton of MS Learn learning paths with modules inside that comprises all of the readiness and content necessary to take this exam. So definitely, if you like taking and going through labs and stuff, there is a ton of it. There's, I think, over 30 modules in all of this content that we've created. It's taken us 2 years to get the certification. We've spent probably the best part of a year building all of this content as well as working on the exam and doing a beta of the exam. So we announced the beta back, I want to say in November. and then had people taking it for about a 2-month period. And now we've just gone GA for the exam. So you've got a study guide that the Learn folks have created. There's all of the MS Learn modules, lab content online. There are study halls that the Learn TV folks are putting together that essentially it's kind of like a video that walks you through the lab so that you can step through the lab with someone, a couple of presenters and a moderator, and watch them as they do it and go along with them or follow along. There's also developer cloud skills challenge as well available for that. And so I definitely would welcome folks to go and take our certification. We used to have one years ago that got retired. It fell out of date. This one we will definitely, most certainly keep it up to date. And in fact, look to add new content to it, just so that it can provide a good basis for people to get certified. And I would encourage folks to get certified. The Cosmos is not a database that you can just kind of pick up and let your intuition kind of rule the day, if you will. It's not an intuitive database to use. Scale out just kind of isn't. We force you to make early decisions on design, like partitioning, that may not be apparent as you go through and work through your design for your app or service. So there's some friction in terms of kind of achieving that perfect balance of efficiency, which a database like Cosmos can give you, but you have to think through the design and the partition strategy and your documents models and all that so you understand it. So anyway, definitely encourage you to take the certification and consume any of the content we've got there for you.
Yeah, perfect. It is really very interesting, and I think many people will try to take this certification. You mentioned conference, Cosmos DB conference. Can you share a little bit more information when our attendees to expect this event and how to join?
Sure. So Cosmos DB Conf is coming up April 19th and the 20th. I got to get rid of this link. The CFP is closed last Friday for this, but I would go to this page. You can also go to our live Cosmos DB Conf streaming page over on Learn TV here, and you can download a reminder to your calendar if you want. But the way this event is structured is we'll have 3 separate live streams. They'll each about 3 hours long. One in the Americas that'll start about 9 a.m. Pacific time, and then another one in Asia Pacific region that starts about 6 a.m. UTC. What is that? About 8 p.m. Pacific. What time is that? So that would be what, 8? If it's 8 p.m., that would be 8:30 IST. It's about 11 and a half hours
difference.
10 hours. All right. I don't know. We keep changing time zones around here. Stupid America. Actually, I guess the whole world doesn't they? So, and then there's another one in Europe, in Middle East, in EMEA as well. That one starts 2 a.m. Pacific. What's that? That's 9 a.m. UTC. So you guys are what? UTC plus 1 or 2?
Plus 2.
2. No. Okay, so add 2 hours to that. So what's that? 9, 11 o'clock a.m. Your guys' time. So right during the middle of the day. So each of them 3 hours, 25 minutes each for the live stream. And then we'll also have a bunch of awesome on-demand sessions as well that people can just watch whenever they want. So April 19th and 20th. Definitely come and check it out. There's great customer stories, awesome sessions from people who are really experienced and deep on Cosmos DB. So definitely come and join us.
Yeah, thank you for this information. Also, I remember that it was in the past, at the end of last year, Serverless conference, Azure Serverless conference. Probably you are planning also to continue to make this conference with focus on Cosmos DB, like one of the
I haven't started anything yet, but yeah, we'll definitely do another serverless conf sometime this September. I expect. I think last time we just had, it was Cosmos, functions, logic apps, and SQL Serverless. We're part of that conference. I think next year I want to open that up a bit. I think we need to get some of the messaging services in there. Certainly things like Service Bus or, serverless in that you pay per message, if you will, or per 1 million messages or whatever their tier is. So we probably should open the open the tent a bit more for additional services in there that kind of go into building these kind of more serverless, if you will, experiences for folks. So, yep, look forward to something this late this spring, early this summer for a CFP if people are interested in presenting, and then for sure something towards late September. Wait till people get back from holidays. So,
Yeah, very useful. We have several topics interesting for attendees, and probably we can discuss these questions. One of the most often seen question is related to actually price estimation and how we can have cost savings and what you can recommend, because uh, very often I hear from companies that they really have higher price than they expect, and this is one of the main cases how experts and business to deal with this case properly to configure Cosmos DB and to have the right price estimation.
so a couple things I'd love to share with your community there is our capacity calculator. I'm not sure if people know this thing exists. We need to do a better job of promoting it. But this is a
I
way
did
to
see
get.
it from any documentation. It's referred in a lot of places.
It is okay.
Yeah,
So
easy
people
to
are familiar
find.
with this thing.
Yeah, I would say so.
Okay, that's funny. Internally, we think that people don't know about this thing, so we're
We
trying
know
to think of
about
a
we
way
know
to.
about it. The problem is that when you have a select query, you actually need to enable diagnostics so that you see the cost of that query in terms of request units. So this is the practice we at least in our team use.
Sure. I mean, you don't need to turn on diagnostics if you don't want. You can just go and get the query stat or the stats out of the query stats window in the Data Explorer.
Yeah, for
So
example.
that's one way you can do it, and just do them one at a time. Log analytics is another way you can do it at kind of scale, which is good. But whichever way you do it, you are definitely on the right track by first measuring what it is you're doing. Cosmos, well, look, it's just like any service, right? So how do you know how much you need unless you measure and do capacity planning around that? So understanding it all goes back to understanding the access patterns to your data, right? Like if I'm building an e-commerce site, how many new customers a day am I creating? How many times am I or my users updating their profile? That's important information because it relates to how many inserts or how many updates or how many queries a day is happening against your customer container. Same with orders. How many orders a day are you processing?
The point is
Um,
that it's not static over time because over time you get more documents. Documents are relatively usually large. They are not
that's
like
correct.
a few bytes, and this changes. It's dynamic process.
So that's right, and that's why when you measure, you can't just measure with a small container. You need to measure with a considerable amount of data because the cost, if you're not designed efficiently, will change over time as well as your latency. And that's the thing you're testing for is, will my design scale? Can I continue to increase the amount of data and still have single digit latency for reads and writes? Can I still have low cost efficient queries because I'm not fanning out across all of my physical partitions for my container? So that's correct. You can reliably come up with patterns or multiples for operations per like user. Like if you know that if at X number of users, you can expect X number of operations per that user per day, and use that to help you kind of load test, if you will, to figure out, okay, if I'm at 100 users, these are the number of these operations I can expect a day, at least a range of them. And then use that to extrapolate out. But also, like you were pointing out, you've got to put data, you have to put real data inside there. Not real, you can put fake data in there. Like Bogus is one of our favorite tools that we use on the team because it's such a good data generator just to put a bunch of load on your database.
I would dare add something else here. It's indexing, for example. Another problem is the, let us say, the auto indexing, and it's made that easy. It just works, but it is going to put you additional expenses on inserts and updates if you don't have this in mind. So it's better to use indexing on exactly what you need if you're having larger documents.
That's correct. So this is something we recommend to customers once they're getting into production, is to evaluate the queries they run and then customize their indexing policy so that they're not indexing data that they don't need to be. That's not used in their queries, in the filter predicate for their queries. And we start off by defaulting to indexing all because it's easier to start with rather than like on a SQL side, they index nothing. So you have to explicitly create indexes. This is obnoxious from a development standpoint, at least we feel it is. So we index everything by default. But the other reason we do that is because Cosmos is schema agnostic. So we don't enforce schema. So if you want to evolve your database model, you can if you were just defaulting to index everything. And what we recommend, and what I recommend, I should say, is default index everything and then explicitly exclude out of there. Because if you do add something new, say your data model changes slightly, if you do an explicit opt-in where you by default exclude /* from your indexing policy, then you've got to go and manually add in any properties so that your queries would continue to work. Versus if you just default by include by default and exclude explicitly, the opposite is true. So you don't have to do anything if your model changes.
Okay. Thank you for this information. There is another relatively new feature that is probably not so often used now, but people need to know a little bit more. So named Cosmos DB Serverless, it is considered consumption plan. Can you share a little more insights when is reasonable to use consumption plan for Cosmos DB and how to consider good practices?
Yeah, I mean, you can use it today. The feature is GA in there. Whether or not it's suitable for an individual's use case is entirely up to them. There is a limit as to the storage and the throughput in there. Let me see if I can figure out what that is. Let's see. Where are you? Capacity, serverless. What's our limits today on this thing? I don't know if we even say anymore. I think there is a cap for storage at 50. Here you are, 50 gig. We're getting ready to increase that by a sizable amount. I'm not going to say how much, and I'm not going to say when, but it's probably around build. But I won't say how much we're going to increase the storage on there. I think your max RU is about 5,000 RU, but I'm not quite sure. The thing you keep in mind is that unlike regular provision throughput, whether it's autoscale or standard, there are no SLAs on latency in there. What we do is we offer SLO for our latency in there for reads and writes in there. So if it's not something that's latency sensitive, then certainly by all means go for it. If the pricing makes sense, right? Like that's why we've got these articles in here in our capacity on when to choose, because the price is going to depend, right, on how you're using it, right? If it's truly something that's, that's not very frequent and has basically zero requests going on when it's not being used, then maybe it's a very good serverless option. If it's somewhat frequently used, then maybe you want to look at autoscale or something else. So, but that's why we've got articles like this, like choosing between provision and serverless. This will
Mark,
help you understand when to use which.
about the pricing of it, because here in the documentation it's written that the billing model is done per hour basis. I think that it's not well written there, but
It's not
I
per
think it is
hour.
for
It's total
it is the
request.
maximum, isn't it the maximum RUs for the hour?
Nope, not for serverless. It's you pay per million requests.
Okay.
That's the billing model you're talking about, is max auto scale per hour.
Okay,
or
thanks.
per hour. That's a provision model. So there, the billing window is an hour. The unit of compute is obviously rate limited per second. But serverless is per request. So,
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah,
More
thank
question?
you.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. Probably one of interesting areas where also you are involved in your direct work is related to security. Even for security, we have now, I think, in preview, Microsoft Defender from Cosmos DB, but could you share probably not only from Microsoft Defender, but in general, information about good practices and what you can recommend when we work with Cosmos DB in the context of security?
Yeah. So some of the things I recommend is one, if you're going to use our primary or master keys for Cosmos, is rotate them and do that at whatever frequency your CISO or other security folks say you should. But if they don't say anything, you should rotate them and get into a good practice as to doing that rotation. Because if the keys get out, then they've got potentially access to everything, depending on which key they get. So you would treat those like you would kind of like your storage keys. If you don't need to use kind of the master keys, my strong recommendation is to use the Azure AD integration and authenticate, provide RBAC around security groups in AAD, in Azure, around specific things you can do, and then put people into those roles and then authenticate against that. And use your service principal ID to go and authenticate against Cosmos. This is ideal because you can do things like make sure that some process or service is running only in the context of some identity, right? So some managed identity, and then you can provide only the amount of access to that data that thing needs. For instance, let's say I've got a process that's I'm building my event-driven architecture on, if you will. So I'm ingesting data, some IoT data or whatever. And then I've got some process that picks that up off of change feed and then goes and then, I don't know, let's say it pushing that into Stream Analytics or pushing it into blob storage for a cold store. So let's just say I'm going to write a little process. I have a little change feed processor. I'm going to run that in an Azure function, and it's just going to sit there and just copy data. Now, I could run that with giving it a master primary key, read-write key to do that. But what if that process gets, I don't know, hacked or corrupted or whatever? If I lose control of that key, I'm going to lose control of my data potentially, because you can do data plane. You can delete resources with data plane master keys. You can do all kinds of other dangerous stuff. But if that person or if that process just was only able to do read operations, which is what change feed would use, and couldn't do anything else, was locked down from doing anything else, then the vulnerability, if you will, is reduced, right? Your threat window is reduced. So I definitely recommend people use that. I mean, people, what's funny is people ask for AAD integration for years and years and years and years. And now that we've got it, it's funny that I thought I would see much more of it being used. It is getting used, don't get me wrong. But I just kind of assumed like the entire world would drop what they were doing and start using it. And that's not quite how it works. So that's one area. The other area too is on the network. So look, Cosmos DB is a database with its endpoint on the public internet. That's not a secure place to have your data exposed. I would strongly recommend that customers using Cosmos DB, in fact, using any database basically, because it's all true. Basically, your database is on the public internet. But use service endpoints, use private endpoints, use any of those networking features that secure your endpoint and restrict it to only be accessed via subnet within Azure, and then control the routing and access to that subnet such that only the right people or services can get access to it. Other things as well, using customer managed keys for doing encryption. All of those things, using Azure policy to prevent deletion or modification or just to audit your resources. This is another thing I see too is I see support tickets all the time from people who are like, hey, who created that database or container? I'm not, who like, they don't know who's doing what. Doing auditing is something there's a lot of good controls for it, whether it's Azure policy or just other controls and other things within Azure that allow people to audit. We have a way you can do control plane auditing in Cosmos with log analytics. You still have to jump through some hoops to tie it back to a service principal out of the ARM logs, but it's better now than what it was where we didn't offer that at all. So did I answer your questions on security?
Yes, I think very detailed, and thank you for this. And we have also some questions related to integration between Cosmos DB and different AI services, because people started to see different presentations, different articles, Cosmos DB with notebooks, Cosmos DB used with analytics services like Spark. Can you share a little bit more information about what is good to use in this area?
Sure. Let's talk about notebooks. I think most people may know. So we have a notebook feature, or we used to. And then we had a bit of a security incident last September that we called Planisphere, which attacked our notebook infrastructure. And so we had to shut that down. It also forced us to shut down things like Mongo Shell and Cassandra CQL Shell, which was built on the same infrastructure. These are now coming back, believe it or not. So your mileage may vary in terms of what you can see. Hopefully you can still see my screen. But here you can see, here's a public gallery of notebooks that people have created in here. Here's a COVID-19 vaccination one. There's all kinds of awesome, both C# and Python. I don't know if people know this, but notebooks now can support C#, so you can write C# in these things. And also, they're notebooks, so you get to take advantage of all of the cool visualization libraries and stuff that are available via notebooks in here. So notebooks are coming back. You may see them now. I know that we're just kind of slowly rolling these out for people, and we haven't made a big announcement about it yet. So that's one. The other one is you were talking about integration into things like search. So we have very easy integration for our SQL API into things like Azure Search. So you can go and just select a search service in here and then connect your data. You can do things like faceted search, all kinds of things. It's very well done in terms of kind of that connectivity, if you will, in there. There's also, see if I can find this. Connectivity, where are you? Integrate. Here's Azure Cognitive Search. So if you go into our SQL Core API, how-to guides, integrate with other Azure services, and then you can see here is Azure Cognitive Search. That will walk you through how you can go and set up your index, get connected, configure your search, and then just start using it within your application. This is very helpful for when you need basically free text type of capability. Cosmos as a query engine does not offer that kind of ability to scan over free text, if you will, with it. So this can help as long as other way search engines can index kind of all kinds of text, if you will, data in here in your workload. So that's the Azure Cognitive Search. The other one you asked about was Spark, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? So here's something. And in fact, we just did a blog post on this. Where are you? Not too long ago. Reading Spring data with Cosmos v3. So if you go to our blog and you go back to about the middle of December, we have a blog post. So we've built a Spark connector for Cosmos. We had a v2 one. This one's now on v3. And this thing is very well done in terms of providing good high performance way of reading and writing data out of Cosmos. In fact, we recommend our Spark connector for doing things like data migration. One of the cool things that this connector provides is it provides a way of controlling throughput on the writes. So if you have and this is a common refrain I hear from people migrating data is, hey, I'm trying to migrate or copy some data into Cosmos, but it's hammering my collection and I'm trying to actually use it while I'm migrating the data. And I can't use it because ADF or whatever is chewing up all my throughput. With Spark Connector, you can actually assign it a budget for throughput on the writes, and then it'll throttle itself. So this is a very nice capability in that it allows you to simultaneously migrate new data while using the database in some operational sense, whether it's whatever it is you're using it for. But so this is a nice way of migrating data. And by the way, I'll also say, even migrating other data like Mongo, there's a Spark connector for that. It doesn't have the throughput control on it, but it is a way we recommend for people if they want to migrate from Mongo with the large amount of data. This is a good way of doing it. There's ADF as well. You can migrate data using that. There's also a new capability for ADF to read off of our change feed. So it's almost now capable of being able to do kind of online migrations. That's kind of the ADF is great at doing like offline migration, right? Because it's not really set up for change data capture for streaming. Whereas you've got something like Spark or Kafka that is built for streaming. So a better way of doing live migration, if you will, or live data in motion. Does that answer the questions? I'm sorry if I'm...
Yes, exactly. This is very detailed and complete answer. Quite often, we use Cosmos DB for IoT solutions, including me and Evelyn also. Probably we can discuss this area. Even Evelyn has some additional questions and comments here, but yes, IoT is one of the area where Cosmos DB, regarding to our experience and companies where we work, really have applications. So probably it will be interesting and good to discuss a little bit more about these opportunities.
Yeah, so I mean, Cosmos is used in a lot of IoT scenarios, and there's a few reasons why. One, as a scale-out database, you can there's basically no theoretical limit as to how much throughput capacity you can provision and have, right? Because as a scale-out, you just keep adding additional servers, and each of those functionally becomes not an endpoint, if you will, although kind of, but becomes a path for ingesting data, and that can be done in parallel with other data being ingested, provided that you've designed your workload such that you are getting those requests across a range of partition key values, right? So, because the partition key value kind of is the address, if you will, for the or how you route data in Cosmos. If you are always routing to the same partition, you are never going to achieve scalability in terms of the rights that you have within that workload.
One of the publicly available proposals, which even Microsoft have given on that, is to think during design time the partitioning strategy so that you have evenly loading the partitions. So it is, let's say, publicly available suggestion or proposal by Microsoft for the design.
Good. Well, I'm glad people are aware of that, because it absolutely is critical if you're going to have a scalable solution where you're ingesting large, vast quantities of data. Here's the thing: is designing for write-heavy scenarios is only part of the battle. You still have to read data out of the database or out of the collection that you have. It's not often that you would do high concurrency queries using the same partition key. You could, I mean, if you let's just say you were partitioned by its device ID, which typically is a good partition key, or maybe device ID and date. Although we definitely encourage people to stay away from date as a partition key, simply because you'll always have a hot partition on the day you write the data. So you want to spread that out. And so device ID, at least in those scenarios, tends to be a better choice. But you rarely would do high concurrency queries against a device ID. You might, and if you do, that's fine. But often you're going to want to aggregate and look at that data using a different set of filters or set of different wear conditions. You may want to aggregate by city, or by device type, or by vendor, or by, I don't know, what floor it's on, or by, I don't know. You just think of another thing. But if you are running high concurrency queries, well, a couple of things have to happen. If you're ingesting data, maybe IoT Hub is doing some sort of pre-aggregation for you, and then you're ingesting that. If it's just ingesting raw data, there's probably some aggregation going on. So you're probably going to have some sort of streaming, like Stream Analytics or something that's going to be building aggregates over data, and then you want to materialize those back. And then if you're going to serve, and then you may serve those from Cosmos at some way, shape, or form. You may do further, even bigger, larger aggregations over data. And then I don't know what you do with that. You can write that back to Cosmos, use Cosmos again as a serving layer. You can query that, say, directly out of, say, a Stream Analytics. Do some kind of windowing functions on that data, tumbling window over that data over some period of time. You may connect it to a Power BI to do a dashboard. You may use something like Synapse Link, which is another huge feature, by the way, that I don't think people realize how important that is. But Synapse Link essentially gives Microsoft, in fact, I think it's the very first, at least in my experience, it's the very first database offering that's actually a true HTAP offering. Like, I've never seen anything else that people talk about HTAP, but I've never seen anything where you actually had completely isolated operational and analytical workloads, where one did not impact on the performance of another, which is what we've got with Synapse Link, where we take it automatically ETL all the data that comes out of our JSON store and then put that into a column store format where now you can go and you can provision your own Spark or SQL clusters and compute, and then write your own queries against that. Or you could go and train models using that, right? You could take advantage of everything in Synapse once you've got that data in there and build AI and machine learning models off of it, or do dashboarding and reporting out of Power BI or some big data analytics, whatever it is you want to do within there, right? Because that's kind of, you're ingesting all that data in your IoT scenario for hopefully to get some insights as to what the heck is going on with your building or your plant or your supply chain or whatever it is your workload is.
There is another suggested strategy for synthetic partition keys. Intuitively, me myself, I haven't used them because for me it's a little bit difficult to understand. So I would personally ask such question. So aren't the synthetic keys like you have the device ID, but you add a random number between? I think that in the documentation, the proposed example is between 1 and 400 or so, so that you could in parallel write in multiple partitions. But isn't this affecting? Okay, it's benefiting the write operations, but isn't it affecting the RUs for the select operations?
Sure. I mean, here's the thing: a synthetic partition key on the read path is useless unless you have all of the components of it. Otherwise, you're back to doing fan-out queries. We actually have something to address that that kind of issue with using synthetic partition keys. We have this new feature called Hierarchical partition keys, which is now in, I think, a private preview. We should be coming out very soon with more of a public open preview, a gated preview. That fundamentally addresses kind of the issue you're talking about. I'll give you an example. So like in an IoT scenario, I don't have a good partition key to distribute my load. I'm going to maybe use a device ID and some random GUID and a timestamp or whatever and I'm going to concatenate all that into my partition key so that I can get good spread of my writes across the partition key range. The problem is, of course, is you need all three of those things on a query to query your data because it's a single property, and you can't do like a left or something and do a string, strip a string or whatever like that, and then use that in a filter predicate. It doesn't work. It just ends up going back to being a full scan, and not only that, but it's a fan out as well, so it's going to hit all the partitions. So hierarchical partition keys allow you to define a hierarchy of partition keys. And the example I use is, let's just assume you're a SaaS provider. So you have customers. Each of these customers is a different tenant. And let's say I've got mom and pop hardware shop is customer A. Let's also say I've got maybe a coffee shop franchise. So they've got 10, 12 stores around town. And then that's customer B, and then customer C is let's say Microsoft. Okay, and so I'm setting up my SaaS application for them. I've got a problem, and that is I have massive asymmetry between the sizes of my tenants, right? Like mom and pop hardware shop, very few requests, very low data. My coffee franchise, a little bigger. Maybe 2-3 times the size. And then you have Microsoft, which is like 40, 50, 100 times the size, right? So if I use customer ID or tenant ID as my partition key, what am I going to end up with? I'm going to end up with hot partitions, especially for the data that's for Microsoft, that tenant. I need a way to be able to amortize that over a greater number of partition key values. So hierarchical partition keys give me a chance to do that because I can define a tenant ID, and then within the tenant, I can define, say, a department ID, and then within that department, I could say define an employee ID. And now what I can get is a hierarchy of partition keys where at the lowest level, I've kind of stripped away that asymmetry, and now I've got relatively even partition keys, assuming that each employee does roughly the same amount of stuff or needs roughly the same amount of request. And that the only thing that's different is the number of employees between them, right? So you obviously would have to analyze this yourself and say, okay, does that make sense? Does that does that spread the partition key load? And not only that, but do my queries typically involve one or more of those values, right? So like I would know like the employee is working for Microsoft, is in that department, and I have their ID. Great. Now I can do a query using all three of those, and I can go directly to that partition. Even if I don't, though, let's just say I want to run a query that says like does an aggregate over a department. I can do that and still hit a bounded number of partitions. I'm not completely unbounded, which is what I would do if I didn't use any of those things. Even at the highest level, I could still run a query to aggregate by like tenant ID. Yeah, it's going to hit a lot of partitions because Microsoft's got a massive amount of data in there, but it's still more efficient than doing a full fan out query in there. So that's the promise and excitement with the hierarchical partition keys. I think it's going to it's going to help a lot, especially if you're building multi-tenant SaaS applications, or you have some other need where you've got this high level of asymmetry between potential different entities, if you will, within your data.
Yeah, thank you. And we had question exactly related to this feature. I show this question. Probably the only one detail which we didn't discuss is it available also in SDKs, which we will use, because it seems for now it is not available.
It is available in our SDK. I think it's in a preview version, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it is private preview.
Yeah, so you'd have to sign up for the private preview, which I don't know if they're taking anymore because we're getting ready to go to more of a gated preview on this thing. So it's not quite public preview. But it's closer. But to use it, you would. It's already in our .NET SDK. I'm pretty sure it's going to come very soon. If not, it's already there within our Java SDK, both in preview versions. As soon as we get past that private preview, it should come into. Well, let's just put it this way: when we go GA with the service, it'll be in a GA version of our SDK.
Understand. We have one additional interesting question. I don't know how much you can share about growth of Cosmos DB usage and revenue, but yes, one of our attendees and community members, Netko Geshev, asked about some insights in this direction.
Yeah, I can't really share revenue numbers for Cosmos because we don't report them at that level. What I can say is that the service is growing quite rapidly. Definitely, the growth rate looks like a hockey stick, I would say, right now, and that's on a pretty good size base. I would say if you're a consultant, architect out there, and you're curious about database technology that would be beneficial for you to invest some time in and understanding and learning, I would say Cosmos is definitely should be on your short list there. Particularly if you've got years and years of experience doing relational databases. I think it's helpful to understand how this database is different and why it is the way it is, right? Like people didn't just invent this thing out of whole cloth for no reason whatsoever. It actually, having a database built like this it's there for a reason, if you will, right? And that is relational databases can only grow to so big a size. I think it's typically about 4 terabytes in size. Beyond that, you have to actually shard the database itself, right? So hyperscale would be, I think, our functional equivalent for a SQL in that sense. And you see this also with kind of some of the new SQL offerings as well, which are built on Postgres that provide sharding, if you will, in there, because they can only grow so large because they're scale up databases, right? Cosmos is decidedly scale out, right? So we kind of approach it in a very different way, where you have functionally very small shards. I mean, the shards are only 20 gig in size, and we may increase that over time. They were even smaller, but our fleet now is all basically uniform, which allowed us to make that bigger. But it makes you design in a different way when you have a partition which is only 20 gig in size. I mean, that's functionally kind of for whatever piece of data that's going to center around. I mean, that's why partition strategy is so important. It's because what data do I want co-located on that same unit of compute, right? Because if within the partition I get all of the features of like transactions, right? Like I get full asset semantics over data that sits within a single logical partition. So if I want to create an order and then update my customer record, I can do that within a transaction if I am partitioned on something that those two things share. That may be like customer ID, right? Like you need a customer to make an order, and if you're going to update the customer record, you need the customer ID. So that would be like a partition key where, okay, I need to use a transaction. So how do I partition my data? But it's, again, it makes you think really hard about the workload and scalability kind of early on. So there's a different set of skills when designing for a database like this. But if you learn kind of the basics on this thing, the benefit is that you can have a database that has theoretically infinite scalability, infinite size, right? I can have a database that's a megabyte in size or several petabytes in size. If I've designed it correctly, my latency for reads and writes is still going to be single digits milliseconds, right? That's not possible with a relational database once you get into, I mean, you can't even get to petabytes in size, but you can't access data that quickly. But when everything is kind of in a scale out model, right? It's like everything is shallow in a scale out database, right? So you don't have to go far to get it, which is how you get that kind of that low latency, no matter how big the size is, right? And by the way, if you design well, it's also efficient in terms of cost, which is another thing we hear quite frequently is Cosmos is so expensive. Well, if you don't know how to use it, yes, it's expensive and it's slow. But if you know how to design for scale out, it's quite efficient. And it's efficient at a greater range of scalability. Like you can be efficient at like a few megs, you can be efficient at petabytes. Again, not possible with scale up.
Thank you. I think that you answered the last question, which was shown on the list. And I don't know if we missed some of new cool features coming in Cosmos DB. If you think that it is valuable to share some additional information, it will be really great for our attendees.
So here's the stuff I would point you to is there's a lot of great content on our little developer site here. Like if you go on the homepage here, like you can try for free if you want. By the way, we've got a Try Cosmos experience here where people can just sign in with like a MSA, like their Outlook or Hotmail account or whatever, and then they can try for free, and they can get it free for 30 days. And actually, it's a pretty good size. They can get like I think 20,000 RU. It only works in a single region, and you need your MSA to access it. So you can't from your regular Azure subscription, but you can go and create this database and then start playing with it. Open up Visual Studio or VS Code, start writing code against it, and kick the tires on this thing. We've also got a free tier as well that customers can try. That's how many RU? I think like 1,000 RU.
1,000
in there. Also, we've got throughput caps. So if you want to keep it free, you can set that. Say don't let it provision any more throughput. Other stuff I want to point you to. So like all of our getting starteds are all on this site here. If you want to learn more about our certification, you can go here. We have online labs over on Learn. You can get all those here. We have a ton of architectural guidance in here. So if you want guidance on building IoT apps, I've got a page with architecture guides, all things like episodes from our podcast. This one had the folks on there. There's a transportation IoT streaming. There's all kinds of different workloads in here and architecture guides that customers can just check out, and some of these include reference implementations too, so you can clone it and run it. In tools, we've got things like our emulator. There's a little plugin for VS Code, Azure Data Factory. Here's some third-party tools that are very popular, like Alpaca, Cerebrata. And then the other stuff I wanted to show you is all of the community stuff. So like a single page with everything you need if you're a community member. We have a global user group that I started with a bunch of MVPs last year. We've had mostly every month we've had a meetup. Still trying to, I don't know if we'll do one this month, but we'll pick up again next month. There's tons of samples. This is our new user voice. Like we shut down user voice, or Microsoft did last year. So there's a new Azure Ideas thing you can use. Our YouTube channel has got a ton of videos, whether it's presentations from past conferences, whether it's what is this? Oh, that's community subscribe. My podcast is up here. All kinds of different channels in here for all kinds of basically everything. So here's all the live TV episodes in here. Lots of great content from there. SDKs and samples as well. So if people want to go and download our SDK or any of the samples from GitHub repositories, they can try that there too. So everything you need kind of in one-stop shop right here is just a good thing to kind of check out. Lots of cool content. I try to keep this as up to date as I can. And so, yeah, hopefully that gives you guys lots of good stuff to work with.
Is it possible people from community to contribute in these materials, documentation? Probably not everyone knows that MVPs can be involved, but how is possible actually to share experience and to contribute to extend
Like all these samples, I think all sit up over on Azure Samples on GitHub. So I think if you go over to GitHub, Azure Samples, I think people can go. You got to sign the CLA. I don't know if this the same way everybody else does. It might be here. No, that just takes them back to that. Well, start with github.com/Azure Samples and see if you can find the. Where is it? I don't know where this is supposed to be. People. Maybe this is it. Yeah, I don't know. I can try and look this up. There's a way to join so that people can contribute samples on Azure Samples, and then they'll show up in the samples thing here on Azure Cosmos Samples, Azure Cosmos or Azure Samples, I should say, in here. Also, Stack Overflow. I'm constantly kind of trying to keep an eye on stuff in there as well as Q&A. But yeah, this is kind of all of our community stuff in here. And then, of course, we've got Cosmos Conf. We've got our live TV podcast right here as well. One of mine next week, going to talk about Python SDK. So yeah, this is all of our stuff. And then, of course, on Twitter as well. So if you have questions, you can reach out on Twitter.
Yeah, very complete answer. What you can recommend to for our attendees how to start and what you can wish to them when they consider to start dealing with Cosmos DB, to learn Cosmos DB, to stay professional there?
I would say if you're brand new and starting, start with our quick starts and just download or go to the portal, create a new free account in there, and then go and just create and do a quick start from in here. You can create a quick start and then download your app within here. So we'll automatically create like an items container in there. And then you can download an app which will have the keys like injected in there, and then you can F5 the thing and start playing with it. Another thing I would recommend too is this is another repo that I created that talks about it. Actually, I built it for a talk that I give on modeling and partitioning. And we've actually built Microsoft Learn modules around this. But this Cosmic Works is basically a Cosmos version of AdventureWorks. So we took and ported over that AdventureWorks 2017 database, or a part of it at least, and we remodeled it and partitioned it for, like, if I was going to design this thing, AdventureWorks on Cosmos, what would that look like? And so this whole talk here actually walks you through the steps to migrate a database. And there's actually there's a deck in here too somewhere. Here we go. That you can walk through the talk and the steps as to how do you take relational databases and migrate them for high efficiency, high performance Cosmos databases. And so it shows a lot of great techniques in here, like how to use our SDK for doing basic CRUD operations, how to do queries, how to do transactions, how to delete data, how to update data. It shows how to use change feed to do things like how do you maintain referential integrity between data, because we're a non-relational database, so we don't do that out of the box. You have to use other techniques or other tricks to maintain that type of those types of relationships within there. So I would definitely, if you're going to start, this Cosmic Works repository is a great way to start. And it's actually pretty easy to use. You've got a deploy to Azure button here, and then you can fire this thing up and then get it connected to your account, and then run the data loader, and then it'll load the data into each of the databases. It takes about 5-10 minutes. So, and by the way, this one probably won't work on a free tier. You need a little bit more throughput on there, but you can scale it up and then scale it back down. Actually, it's built to use auto scale, so it should scale itself up and down. But this will give you really great hands-on for SDK, which is important because that's our surface area is our SDK, but also can teach you the modeling and partitioning techniques that you absolutely have to have to be successful on this database. You cannot build. I mean, you could build small stuff that doesn't need to scale. That's fine. If you want something that's built to scale, then you need to learn what is in this repo.
Thank you very much. It was really very, very important and very useful to share all this information with us. And we really appreciate that you spent your time here with our community, because I know that you are very busy. We will continue this session with some details with Evelyn, because he prepared some additional information related to Cosmos DB. And Mark, really very appreciate your contribution, and hope to see you soon again.
Yeah, well, events are starting to open up, so hopefully I'll see folks. I'm going to be at IglooConf in July, which is the only time of year that I want to be in Finland. So I'm looking forward to that, and looking forward to just hopefully getting to see people back out on the road again in person. I'm kind of going a little crazy not being able to travel. So keep your fingers crossed, folks. We'll maybe hopefully get there this year. So,
Mark, may I just steal 30 seconds just for a question, which I don't think it's
Sure.
easy to answer. I guess that you're pretty well aware of Mongo 5 and the time series collections. And it's something like a secret. No one says publicly when MongoDB 5 would be supported by the API in Cosmos DB.
I don't have a date for when we would release support for Mongo 5.0.
But do you see benefits? Do you planning to, or explicitly not wish
time
to?
series data?
Yeah, the time series collections in Mongo, at least they're pretty proud with it. They say more performance, more efficient storage of time series data, etc. And yeah, that is a thing which people are asking here and there.
Sure. I mean, everybody wants whatever the latest and greatest is. So a couple things. We don't have a date yet for announcing support for 5.0. We just announced support for 4.2. The other thing I'll say too is our approach is not to go and build to a server version for Mongo. What we do is we go and we build the features that our customers are asking for. So we take a little more pragmatic approach to how we support Mongo functionality. For instance, we now have support, or we're calling it support for 4.2. That includes pretty much all of the features, but there is an exception, and that is we don't support distributed transactions across collections like they do in Mongo 4.2. And the reason is because Cosmos itself does not support distributed transactions across partitions, right? Logical partitions or even physical partitions. And so you can't do that across containers. And the reason we do that is because once you start enlisting distributed transactions as part of your design or your app, you run the risk of bad things potentially happening. Like you could run into issues with availability if, say, you're entering into a lock or looking to lock data across two different nodes of compute or partitions or collections, and something happens to one of them and you cannot release the lock. So you're going to have availability issues potential, or latency, or other performance or stability issues. Distributed transactions just don't play well into that notion of predictability, if you will. So we don't support it, and I don't expect. I mean, maybe I can't say never, but I can say right now that our philosophy is that most customers do not require distributed transactions. At least this is what we see from data. So it doesn't make sense for us to kind of bend backwards to support that when we don't see a massive opportunity in doing so. Now, that could change in the future, and we may make that a possibility.
This is about 4.2, but how about the time series collections?
The same thing applies, right? So Mongo likely went and created that because they had some need of their customers or some subset that wanted to do time series data on their Mongo, and there was no natural way for them to go for that. Maybe they would have to go and use some other vendor. So they wanted to keep that in house, so they went and built a time series engine, query engine for their database. We don't have that need in Cosmos. I mean, we have Custo or ADX that does time series data. You can actually connect Custo and Cosmos as well. And there's also Azure Stream Analytics, which provides time series data, and we have very good integration within there. So the answer to your question is, I don't see us building time series capabilities directly within Cosmos. I see that as more of a bringing the right service or tool to do the job. And in this case, that would be one of the other two services do that. Now, I don't want to conclude that we would never do it, but like I said, our approach
you were pretty clear, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Really, that was really a secret which very few people would be able to comment. So nice to have you on board today and have all this in-deep in-house news from you.
Good. Well, I'm glad you all enjoyed it. Hopefully it was valuable to you all. And yeah, feel free to have me again. I think I've been twice to your group now, Mikhail.
We have this event twice per year, but we have many other events. So definitely we would like to have you more than twice than a year.
Okay. Let's try, and we'll do something then later this year. Get me back. I can talk more about all the great stuff that we released. We've got, by the way, stay tuned for Build this year. There is a ton of awesome stuff coming out for Build. I wish I could share with you now, but I'd rather you tune in and be surprised when we announce it. So stay tuned.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Okay. Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Have a nice day.
All right. Bye-bye.
And it's really beginning of the day for him.
Yes, it is early morning in Seattle area. Evelyn, do you want to share some additional information? Because I know that you prepared something for this event?
I was thinking mostly to raise a couple of the topics, probably with probably to you as well. Uh,
I will show this.
I guess you can see my screen.
Yep, it is shared.
Okay, I'll go quite quickly through this, but one of the things is I was having in mind to ask a couple of questions about time series because we we're probably on monthly basis or bi-monthly comparing different databases for time series and IoT workload. Uh, a guy named Baron Schwartz, who has done a lot on MySQL, shares a couple of things which usually databases that are handling time series workloads should have in mind, and it's that writes are mostly the operations in these cases. When you are querying, quite often you are querying sequentially, which you shall have in mind when designing the structure. And when you're deleting, usually you're deleting in bulk statements and years. Uh, there are lots of not a lot, but there are a couple of referenced time series solutions with Cosmos DB. And one of the interesting things to me is that Cosmos DB is proposed to be used as a hot store, not that much as a cold store, but as a hot store. And this is one of the reference architectures where you could see on step one events generated from IoT devices ingested from Azure IoT Hub. Then you go through stream analytics. Then the hot store is Cosmos DB, where you're storing documents.
By the
And
way, I will just interrupt you here for
yeah,
one
at any time.
command. Because yes, Cosmos DB is more often used for hot store, but one of the advantages, if you have good understanding about the amount of data and you have no need to keep your data from many years, is that you can consider Cosmos DB for storage for both, for hot path and for cold path, and it is one of the options to have the same platform for different type of storages. It is not possible always to do it, just it is option when we have good understanding about what kind of data and for how long and what amount of data we have. There are options to do that only with
I
Cosmos
was
DB.
about to ask Mark then. So if you know, the point is why in the even in the proposed architecture, time series insights is proposed as a solution for analytics and reporting, and to some extent, yeah, Cosmos DB is is the hot store, and that was one of the questions which I was having. So why they are not targeting this area as well? That was a thing I was having in mind. The other two things is that in the documentation there are two reference cases. One is from Exxon Mobil, where they are monitoring 50,000 wells, and the scenario is to store telemetry. And the second use case is from Toyota, where they're using Cosmos DB as a catalog in order to ensure that the assembly line never stops. And the key features in this case are the high availability and low latency. So these are the two reference cases which you could see as examples. What I, for me, from because I mentioned that we quite often compare different databases. By the way, KX KDB Plus is one of the next which we're going to compare. It's a commercial offering coming from the US, but it's also it's now the second ranked database for time series. But it is the first of all, it is hosted model and high availability. That is one of the things which is very good, which means also the availability to scale, not on your resources. It's very flexible. You could typically, especially when you ingest data from different sources in the IoT realm, you receive JSON messages in different formats. So it's very much appropriate that you have um, you could have this flexibility to have different structures of these JSON documents. Mark mentioned already a lot about the partitioning, the importance of designing the partitioning strategy appropriately in the very beginning. Um, the auto scale and the ability to scale without downtime is also a wow thing. The retention policy is also interesting because it's automatic deletion of documents. But the interesting point here is that it's one of the ways to optimize your RU usage, because when you're using the TTL function, you're deleting basically for free with leftover RUs which you're not using. And another cool feature is the change feed, which is the outputs which document it outputs the documents that are changed, and it's a sorted list of these documents, and you could use an Azure function to subscribe for these changes. um, I personally, Mike, this is probably going to be a question to you, but for me personally, the SQL API is, let us say, most intuitive to me at least. But are there any, um, let us call it, penalties in terms of RUs, or I don't know what, if you're using the other APIs instead?
Um, do you consider differences in price or lack of features? Because if we talk about
Lack of
lack of
features is
features,
more clear. It is obvious. If you don't see it in the API, you know it's not there. But the behavior, the performance, and the cost isn't that transparent. It's one of the
no.
problems which we are having with Cosmos DB.
Actually, cost is transparent at least for several APIs, for Core SQL, for Mongo API, and for Cassandra. In capacity calculator demonstrated from Mark, you can check, and price is exactly the same. Frankly, I cannot answer you from for Graph API, for example, how it works. But for these three APIs, it works in a way where for the same amount, for the same request units, you have the same price. There could
Um,
be performance cases. I heard from customers that they have some issues in specific cases with MongoDB. I'm not sure if it is really true, because it depends on how they use this setup and API. Just I heard, but we didn't go into discussions. My personal understanding is that these probably need to be um, discussed more detailed about performance, about the price. It is absolutely the same, at least for APIs
it is a
available.
common complaint even on online, and we have seen this by ourselves. You could just get some. It's far from real, the calculations which you receive there. A part of the problem is different sizes in the documentation, the documents which you push. Another part is the larger it gets over time. The larger the partitions are getting over time, you're having more RUs as requirements. The automatic indexing is also affecting it. It depends what you index or not, and these are factors that are not
Yep.
available there. So the proposed is, okay, guys, you have something. But when you have a query, just go run it and see how many are used. And even Mark said in mind to do this when you have a sufficient amount of documents in the database, and here you could use this and that generator to simulate this.
Yeah, I absolutely agree that it is very difficult to say. There are a lot of discussions about this. There are some complaints from customers, but um, uh, case by case need to be considered how is the exact setup, because more often problems comes not from the API in general, but from some more general rules how to have good performance with
Yeah, okay,
Cosmos
okay.
DB.
Okay, so you say that basically there is no huge difference between the APIs. If the features are the same and you could do the same, the performance and cost you could expect should be nearly the same as well.
Yes, the cost for sure. For performance, probably we need to have more details, but at least for MongoDB and Cosmos DB, my understanding is that when we have such kind of situation, we need to expect similar performance if we have the right configuration.
Just a quick off topic, because one of the database from previous years and meetings, we're using Influx a lot, and Influx version 2 is having a new language, Flux, and you could write the same thing with both Flux and Influx, and Flux is extremely powerful, but Flux queries for simple things are about 30 times slower than Influx queries. And I was thinking of that at that time. Integrated cache is another interesting thing, which it's extremely easy to be turned on, but it's also quite expensive. It starts from 270 euro per month, and there is a dedicated 4, 8, or 16 gigabyte machine under it. But it's very easy to set up, no custom code. You don't need to do anything for the invalidation of this cache. So this is one of the features which helps a lot. What we find as trouble is, but Mark addressed it at the very end. He said that they are just not interested in doing this, and there are other more appropriate tools to do this. So that this is probably not on their agenda. But we personally were missing analytical functions on time series in Cosmos DB, like standard deviation, forecasting, derivatives, moving average, exponential moving average, difference, covariance, histogram. Uh, these are things that help a lot in when you want to understand what you have in your time series. So not just making a query, but trying to understand what you have in the data, like something like a second level of things. Of course, you could do this by yourselves in APIs afterwards, etc. But when you have it ready in the database, it's another thing. Mark mentioned about the free tier which is available, but I wanted to emphasize that using cost alerts is a thing you should have in mind. It's also a good idea. The 20 gigabytes partition limit, it was 10 in the past. The free tier gives you 1000 request units and 25 gigabytes of storage. Mark also mentioned the serverless, and you asked about this, and it was introduced in 2021, and it's probably the cheapest option to start from for most of the use cases.
Absolutely.
And another thing which we were missing is that there is no downsampling. The downsampling and continuous queries or scheduled jobs, you could do scheduled jobs with Azure functions, by the way. And I think this is the proposed way. But the downsampling is, imagine you're having telemetry every 1 minute or every second, but after a week or so, you are not interested in that in such a telemetry. You're interested a value once per 15 minutes something like the mean for 15 minutes is going to be fine. So here is you need to write Azure function. Um, Also, the hot versus cold store, we challenged this topic. For me, it's difficult to understand this. You provided some explanation on that, Mike. And yes, the indexing, that it could be both curse and blessing. You have automatic indexing. Mark mentioned it, and the point is that when things happen very easily, it's also very easy to make mistakes, which at some point of time appear to be expensive mistakes for someone. And in private conversation, I mentioned to you that we had customers that, for example, ended up in few months with a bill like 5,000 euro. So you really need to know how to use Cosmos DB. So the certification,
Yeah.
which Mark emphasized, I think 2 or 3 times in the beginning and at the end of the of his presence. Yeah, it's a good thing to have if you're valuing the money of your employer or customer. Basically, this is quickly the topics which I'm prepared and I'm thinking as weaknesses and strengths for IoT workloads. Uh, yeah, if you have another one, I wouldn't like any of the people to be online more than they would. I mean, it's night. Probably they need to have a bite or have some time with nice people and a beer.
We will have more sessions on Cosmos DB. Actually, Alex Mang, who is one of the most active trainers, also involved in Microsoft Learn and Microsoft Materials, will join some of next sessions. He was just busy today, so I suppose that Alex also will share a lot of things because he used Cosmos DB actively in practice and also prepared many certification courses, and not only certification, many learning materials, even official Microsoft materials. So we will have more sessions on Cosmos DB because really good knowledge and good understanding of Cosmos DB can help you to use this platform and to bring all benefits. And if you tune it in a proper way, it will be not very expensive and you can use it for different use cases. Evelyn, before to have end of our event, what you will wish to people who want to start dealing with Cosmos DB?
My personal perspective of for Cosmos DB is when I think of Cosmos DB, the first thing I think is a document database, endless scalability, and these are the two things which come to my mind. Uh, Let us use the proper tools for the proper work, and provided that it's hosted, it means that you don't have to maintain your own uh, Docker containers with some it could be Postgre SQL or something like this, uh, or MongoDB by yourself. Uh, so what I would wish, I don't know, Mike. It depends on who needs what, but for me, it's ultimately scalable document database, and when you don't have to put the effort to maintain it, you have it for someone else is doing. And I just think that probably the time series and IoT use cases are not the best, but for document database, this is my top one usage when I would think of Cosmos DB. How about you?
Mm, my personal understanding is that knowledge how Cosmos DB works and proper tuning, at least for some basic things, some basic features, is very important for people to start using effectively Cosmos DB. Many things which you already shared, but yes, several good practices. People need to start learning Cosmos DB, and first things are related to indexing, proper setup of partitioning, and some other things. And they will see that Cosmos DB behave pretty good in a reasonable price with good performance if they start from the beginning to follow these good practices. This is from my side. And I think that we need to wrap up this discussion for this event, because we can discuss the whole evening on Cosmos DB, but we will have other events. We will have many other events. We will have also in May for Azure Global Azure event, former Azure Bootcamp, also sessions on Cosmos DB. We will have in June for Data Saturday Plovdiv, again sessions on Cosmos DB. We will have also for Data Saturday Sofia sessions on Cosmos DB. And Cosmos DB actually is so related to JavaScript because server-side programming also by default is with Node.js, so probably we will have some content related to Cosmos DB also at our JavaScript conferences. So stay tuned, and you can learn a lot of things on Cosmos DB in different contexts at all our conferences. Plus, we will have additional dedicated meetups related to this platform. Thank you very much and have a nice evening.
Thank you for arranging this, Mike. Bye.
Thank you.